Hello, everyone, and welcome to this extra special webinar. I'm really honored to be hosting this today. I want to thank all the team at Publishers Without Borders for giving Publish Her the platform today to bring to you some of the most leading women in global publishing. Thank you to the team who worked behind the scenes to make this happen. So today our session is about women in publishing. As you know, the power of publishing lies in its capacity to give individuals a voice. And how important is it to make sure that women have a voice as well? And that's amplified even more when we have women in the driving seat in their publishing houses. I'm really pleased today to have an all-women panel from around the world, and they'll be joining. Here they are. And I'm going to introduce all of them to you as we move along. So starting from my right, I guess, I'm not sure how you guys are seeing it. I have Thabiso Mahlape, who's from South Africa. Thabiso is a publishing entrepreneur who founded Blackbird Books, which provides a publishing platform for new and established Black writers and narratives. Thabiso created her company to create and propagate African literature that represented Black people in a realistic way. Welcome, Thabiso. And then we have Mitya Osman, who's the CEO and owner of Bangladeshi Children's Publishing House. Mior Panki, I'm sorry if I haven't pronounced it right. You'll let us know how it's pronounced, which produces Bangla books and translations of popular literary works for children from English, Turkish, Indonesian, Italian, Portuguese, and many other languages. Then we have Maria Palante, who is the president and CEO of the Association of American Publishers. She's a copyright lawyer by trade, worked for the Guggenheim Art Museums for nearly a decade, and led the U.S. Copyright Office for 6 years. Wonderful to have you with us, Maria. And then we have Anne Bergman-Tahon, who's the director of the Federation of European Publishers, a post she has held for 16 years. And she's been with the FEP for 30 years this year. Congratulations. And in her role, she's responsible for representing the interests of publishers in Europe at the EU and national level. And last but not least, we have Karine Pansa from Brazil. She's the owner and publishing director of Girasol Brazil and the Brazilian Book Chamber, and she's the National Union of Book Editors representative on the EC Committee of IPA. And I will also introduce myself. I'm Bodour Al Qasimi. I'm the vice president of IPA, and I'm the founder of Publish Her. Publish Her is a community network for women in publishing that promotes and empowers gender balance in the global publishing book business. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, ladies. It's wonderful to have you here with us.
Hello.
And
Hello.
hi, everyone. And I've got some questions here for you. And we're going to start with the first question. And we're going to have people jump in with questions as well. So if anybody who's watching live has a question, please put it in the chat and we'll see it. And the ladies will answer as they see the questions. So as you can see, we've just put the link of Publish Her's website in the bottom of the screen. That's womeninpublishing.org. I founded Publish Her really because of the lack of leadership, the lack of women in leadership positions in publishing. It's something that I always talk about, being the only woman in a room sometimes, and then finding it very lonely up there, very frustrating not to have a community of women around. And I believe a lot of you have faced the same issues. So my first question is to all of you. Can you describe any moments in your career when you were treated unfairly because you were a woman? How did you respond, and how would you respond now? I'm going to start with Thabiso with that question. Go ahead, Thabiso.
Well, I don't know how the publishing world works globally, but in South Africa, we've kind of worked ourselves into a point where the retailers are king. They are the rainmakers. And so there's one big chain that kind of has everyone twirling around their thumb. And I remember because my publishing imprint started off as an imprint of a bigger publishing house, Jacana Media. And so this one day we were going to meet with the CEO to present our new titles and ideas and what we thought, would help, move sales along. And so there we were, there's three of us. It's me, it's the publishing director, who's a woman, and there's a sales manager who's also a woman. And we sat there in the office of this man. And so the two were talking, which is also another thing that you must take into consideration with South Africa is it's not just about being a woman, but there's like a race issue compounded to that. So I'm in there with these two white women and this white man. And every time they said something, every time they brought an idea through, he would say, "Oh, that's stupid. Oh, that's ridiculous." And then I looked at them, but they were just sitting there like giggling. And I thought, oh gosh, no, I can't. I can't take this, because I wasn't allowed ever to kind of tell him to F off, because if I did, it didn't only jeopardize Blackbird Books, but the whole stable, because I was attached to it. And so in that moment, I thought, look, it's either I tell him to F off or I go. So I stood up. I said to them, guys, great stuff. I have another meeting to get to. And I left. And in hindsight, I should have told him. I should have told him where to get off, because that was the second time I was in a room with him and he'd made those kinds of remarks. The other time I was on a panel like this with him talking about book distribution in South Africa. And if you know anything about South Africa, it's that we are a very unequal country. So the book distribution that exists in the moment is only serving the elite. And we sat on this panel and I was talking about how we needed new distribution channels. And then, like, after the end of the panel, he came up to me and he said, "I hope you have new places to sell your books." And I didn't say anything to him. That was like in the first 2 months of Blackbird being alive. And I think I was still kind of unsure, and I was quite taken back by that and destabilized a bit. But in hindsight, I should have really told him to go where the sun don't shine, but I didn't, because I'm a nice girl.
Yeah, I know what you mean, Tabiso. And now when we look back and we see certain situations, we really wish we acted a certain way, or we'd said something differently. But what we're trying to do here really is just make sure that other women don't have to go through this, and I think that's really important. Wonderful. So I'm going to go to Anne next. If Tabiso, you can just mute your mic. And Anne, let's listen to you. Have you ever been through something like that, something similar? Do you have anything to share with us? Any anecdotes or any incidents?
Well, I'm going to not disappoint you, but I think we should be happy to the opposite. I was lucky. I had for 10 years a female boss. So I had none of those problems. We're a very small structure. So, and in Europe, in my position, there's a lot of women. So no one is ever surprised to have a woman in front of them to negotiate legislation or things like that. Where I see a glass ceiling is in the representation in the Federation of European Publishers. We never had a woman president. We only had once a woman in the board. And there are in the representation at this stage, I think of all of the publishers, there's only one woman publisher attending a meeting. So it seems to me that there in the National Association, there are the women are for a reason that I don't have explanation for. They're not interested in being involved in the public affairs like you are, but I think that there's certainly in Europe, there's fewer of them. But I have to say, I never really experimented a difference because I was a woman. I think I'm quite lucky that I can say that.
That's great to hear. I mean, it would be nice to know if there's a future plan for the FEP to support more women to enter the board of FEP at least, because I think when I came into IPA as well, I felt that there were very few women on the executive committee, and talking to Maria, talking to Karini really helped me a lot, and we managed to convince more women to join us on the board. So I think maybe a collective effort is
Well,
going to help.
you have to speak to your counterparts in the various European country, and suggest that they apply as delegate to FEP, and then they can become board members. So I think that everyone would be happy, including our gentlemen colleagues. So let's go
Yeah,
for it.
let's work on that, and let's do that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Homework.
great. I want to move on to Karini, because Karini is also somebody who I know has faced similar issues. I visited your offices in Sao Paulo, and I saw this board that had pictures of all the past presidents of the Publishers Association, and there was Karini, the only woman amongst, like, I don't know, 50 men or something like that. So Karini, tell us a little bit about that.
I was actually the second president, a women president, at the Brazilian Book Chamber. And I had Roseli Boschini, who was previous to me, and all the rest, like 20 other men, was our previous presidents. And it also happens with the board of directors. Nowadays, I think we have like two, not more than this, under 20 other people. So I think that we have to ask for more workforce, and we have sometimes to convince other women to be part of it. Sometimes they don't want to be part. So it's also our responsibility to gather more women and ask them to come with us. And you've been doing this a lot, Boudour. So I think it's really, really important.
I think what you said, both of you actually, Anne and Karini, mentioned something along the lines of that the women don't really want to be part of it. And we'll talk a little bit later about some, guidelines maybe that will help women in their workplace to feel valued, to feel appreciated, because I think that's where the hesitation starts, is that perhaps they don't feel their value. A little bit about like what Tabiso said, their opinions are not taken in, or perhaps they don't feel like they are part of the team. And I think that's a very important conscious decision that leaders have to take into consideration when they're hiring, when they're conducting meetings, to make sure that women feel valued, heard, seen, represented on their boards. Now, I want to go to Mitya. So Mitya, tell us a little bit about the situation in Bangladesh. Have you faced any sort of discrimination, or were you treated unfairly in any situation because you're a woman?
No, not actually. To be honest, I can relate with Annie, but let me tell you about the women in publishing in Bangladesh. We know that the women in publishing, when you talk about it, this industry is dominated by women. Everybody know that, but not much in the leadership role. But as with many other countries, there have not many women in publishing in Bangladesh. So there are even more women in the industry today than 20 years ago. And I think this is a good thing. And also I have blessed with a family where my parents, who raised me as a human being, they don't differentiate me as a man or woman. And I have never realized that this can happen with the girl. But living in Bangladesh, I face more challenge from the society, that women are expected to be a certain way. People are extremely judgmental and tend to mind other people's business a lot. So if you talk about the treated unfairly in an industry, no, I think always believe that our publishing industry is more progressive than any other industry in general. I always believe that. So I personally don't feel in that way. But I have also talked with other amazing women who is in the business. So they sometimes always think that man dismissing women in their opinion, in the voice. So they feel less confident. So I think this is the case actually. And about other, you guys are talking about the leadership in the association, the women in general. In our association, there is the first time the woman who is in the executive board. So, but she's the one who is the first time in after so many years. So, but I think I also find out that the many are not confident or perhaps don't want to see themselves in the association politics and all that. Maybe they are less concerned with the power too. I also know there are some women who don't want to be in that position because they are uncomfortable with conflict in general. So this might be the reason the association association of women don't want to come out. But also, of course, there may be some women out there want to be interested.
That's very interesting, Mitya. I know we spoke a little bit at Sharjah Book Fair, and I was asking you, when are you going to run for president of the Bangladeshi Publishers Association? So I'm waiting for that day to come. I'm going to move on to Maria. Maria, you're having some connectivity issues. So if you drop off, please just join back on again. And we're asking the question, describe any moment in your career where you were treated unfairly for being a woman, or if you have heard of a situation that happened to some colleague or a friend of yours. Please go ahead. Yeah, can you unmute your mic and then you can join the conversation? Perfect.
Sorry, but are you speaking to me?
Yes, Maria. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Sorry. I can hear you a little. I apologize. I must, for some reason, have an unstable internet connection today. But first of all, thank you for convening this incredible panel. It's an honor to be part of it. Welcome to Washington, D.C., well, to my house in Washington, D.C. I thought I might tell a story from when I was a very young lawyer, very soon after I was in law school and I was practicing in New York, representing authors. I was part of a bar association committee, one of only a few women, and certainly the youngest woman by far. And I remember there was a discussion about a very technical aspect of the law. And I made a comment that was accurate and, in my opinion, insightful. But my voice was so soft, and I was so unsure, as we were talking about interjecting, about doing it, confidently, that only the people next to me heard my voice. And what happened next, and this will just show you how women never forget the things that they experience, right? Because this was a very long time ago, was that the gentleman next to me proceeded to make this exact same point from as though it was his idea. Received, that's a great comment, very insightful, that's actually correct, that's a legal issue we hadn't thought of. And when that happens to you when you're a young woman, you just almost freeze, right? Like, you can't believe it's happening. You think it's your fault, even though it's clearly not, right? And then afterwards, he leaned over and just said, and just like looked at me and kind of winked, as though it was some sort of game and that I was supposed to think it was funny. And so, I've never forgotten that. And I think for the young women out there, my message would be, it's not you. That's completely abhorrent behavior, right? From a professional. Some
might call that mansplaining.
Well, it's just sort of like taking credit for something in a power dynamic where he knew I was speaking softly. So I've never forgotten that. And I guess my advice would be, what would I do differently now? Now I would be more confident. I'd be better at committee meetings, right? That's a skill that you have to learn as a professional. But, I think that what we've all learned about power dynamics in general, whether they're gender or race or some other discriminatory power struggle, is that the policies and the overall kind of framework that we all operate in is really what allows this kind of thing to happen, right? So, you know, as I've become a policy expert, I tend to look at the frameworks now. How does something like that happen? What led that person in his professional development to think that that was not only acceptable, but he knew he would get away with it and not have to apologize? And so, you know, for women, I think we build up all of these little experiences and they bother us, and we know it's not us, but then some part of us thinks maybe it's sort of part of our fault. And so it's not. And, you know, that's a story that has stayed with me. And I'm sure everyone on this panel has had something like that happen.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Maria. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people watching as well probably are nodding their heads and they've had something similar happen. And by the way, for anybody watching, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll see them on our screens, and I'm sure my guests will be really happy to answer any of those questions. So this brings me to my next. Oh, wow, there's a question already. So how are your sales during COVID-19 pandemic? Yes, we're going to get to that in a minute. I think my next question, my next question will be about legislation, because I think Maria talked a little bit about that just now. And are there any legislative, social, industry-based changes happening in your countries or improvements that you would like to see at home? This is something that, because we have such a diverse panel, I think our audience will be really interested to see how things are in your country. So, I mean, we all come from different parts of the world. I would love to hear everyone's view on this. So I'm going to start with Mitya, because Mitya has to leave us very soon, unfortunately. So perhaps she'll answer this question and we'll say goodbye. But we'll start with Mitya. What is the situation like in Bangladesh? Are there any gender equality changes happening there? You spoke a little bit about it, but would love to hear more. If you can just unmute your mic.
Yeah, actually, yes, I think I really believe in self-determination. It is so easy for us to blame the macho culture or suggest the system is not in our side, but we have to do more than just proving we're capable technically, but we have to build our own and our female colleague confidence. So, and we have to start standing up for ourselves and believing in ourselves. I think that is what lacked in general in my country, the women lacking the confidence. So today, I think the world has becoming better place. Men today are become more supportive toward women and accept their individuality. And what I love the time we are living right now is that the new generation of women and even men are far more supportive to each other. So there was a time that was not the case, but also women have also become more accepting of who they are. So these are the things also impact in our career, in our personal life, professional life. So I think by the legislation or something, I know, I think where women are become more confident. They're voicing their opinion. If something bad happened, they always try to more vocal about it, even if it's private or something like that.
Thanks for sharing, Mitya, and thank you so much for being part of this conversation. Do you have time to stick around, or do you need to leave right now?
No, not right now. I can stick sometime.
You can stay. All right. So if you see Mitya waving goodbye, it's because it's quite late in Bangladesh. So I've been getting some requests here on the chat to share my story as well as publish her. So some of you may have heard the story before, but I always like to repeat it because I never know who it might inspire. So I remember I was in Rome for the book fair a couple of years ago, and I was waiting at the entrance of the Rome Book Fair, and there were a few men standing there waiting to enter the official opening ceremony of Rome Book Fair. And I was standing there chit-chatting away with them, looking around, and realized that I was the only woman there. There was not a single woman in the room. It was packed full of men. And then this journalist comes in and immediately spots me and asks around and says, "Who's this person?" And somebody tells her, oh, she's from the Arab world, and they say, well, what? She's the only woman in the room. And then she's surprised because of all of the countries in the world, when we have this image of Arab women being, I wouldn't say behind closed doors, but not as outgoing, perhaps, as other women around the world. She was a little bit surprised, and she talked a bit about it on her radio show. And so then I thought about it, and I thought about the instances that I was the only woman in the room and how that felt for me. It felt very lonely, and I felt very intimidated at times. I felt out of place. I felt like I don't belong, in these circles or in these functions. And then I decided I'm pretty sure there are other women who feel like that. And then Maria and I had lunch together in New York one day, and it was just before I was getting into the VP position of IPA, and she asked me, do you remember this, Maria? So what are you going to do for women in publishing? And I thought, oh, wow, that's a very, open-ended question. And then you explained to me that, now that I'm in this position, it's really an opportunity to open the door for other women. So I thank you, Maria, from the bottom of my heart for really leading me on this journey and really showing me that, being in this position is an opportunity to serve the industry in a way that's unique and really opening the door for other women to join. So thank you for that, Maria. And then since then, I've established Publish Her, and we've had a couple of events around the world. We had one in London, Nairobi, Frankfurt. Some of you have joined these events. We had one in Sharjah recently. And of course, right now we can't meet face to face, but this is sort of like the best option of convening and meeting, each other. We've got a question here from Simone. Could you give us a few names of women and men you think we should follow, who are great examples to look up to in our pursuit for gender equity and equality in publishing? So maybe Anne, I'll ask you that question, if you don't mind, to answer that question for Simone. Please unmute.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I was looking where the buttons were. I would think of in the UK, there's been a rare number of women being president of the Publisher Association over the years. And I think that this is, in an industry which is quite male dominated, but however, they've made the decision to have a woman as president, and I think that they know they have appointed a woman as the IPA the UK delegate within the IPA committee. I think that's all the women who are rising to the challenges of getting good position in publishing. I'm sorry, I'm not going to give you names like that. I think it would be either too long or discriminatory, but I think that they are inspiring women. But I think that someone else wants to answer.
Go ahead, Tabiso. And then after that, Maria can jump in as well. Yeah.
What I think is difficult for me in terms of listing women. So, for example, in South Africa, the independent women publishers are so small that they would get lost in the sea of all the publishers that are out there. So it's almost impossible for us to mention women because to mention them would mean that the money gets into the pockets of men. And I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like this big wave of reading African literature that's kind of swept up South Africa. And I always have to ask people, when you're saying you're reading African literature, who are you reading? How do you define it? Are you defining it by the people who write it or by the people that make money from it? And right now, the people that make money from African writing in the world are the big 5 publishers that are in the North, well, from me, up there. So it's almost like that when you talk about women publishers. So the first time I think I ever realized. So I've always been in South Africa. When I was studying, I had dreams of being rich. I used to tell my lecturer, I'm going to buy Jimmy Choos and stuff, let alone that Jimmy Choos doesn't make shoes for fat people. But I thought I could. And then I got into publishing and it wasn't cute. It's not, the margins here are very small. It's not a very lucrative business. And then last year I went to Frankfurt for the first time. And then I saw there was like so many white men there. And that's how I knew there's money in publishing, because white men don't gather around where there isn't money. I knew there's money in publishing, but it's how to channel it, how to make sure that, so for me, it's a compounded issue again, but how do we channel it to make sure that women publishers are benefiting from this and that African publishers are benefiting from this? Because when I came back, I realized that a lot of people are looking for African content, but who's curating this African content? And also, if we start talking about gender equality and representation, are we saying that we just want to see more faces in the publishing space of women, or are we saying we want women in meaningful positions within these publishing structures? Because to mention women now, and I know many right now, but to mention them would mean that the money that comes with that social recognition goes into the hands and the pockets of white men. And that's where my issue is that we've got to look at how we are, meaningfully empowering the misrepresented groups that we want to empower.
Yeah, I hear you, Tabi. So the power dynamics have to be fair. So I'm going to move on to Maria. I think you had your hand up for the last question. And sorry, I dropped off. I'm back again. So Maria, please go ahead. Do you have any comments regarding the last question?
Sure. Yeah, I think the question was, who are some other great men or women that are helping to promote women? I'm not sure what continent the question is coming from, but in the US, I will say that I feel that AAP's board is very, very involved and aware of inequality generally. And so when, my board hired me 3.5 years ago, and, the search team was predominantly men. The chairman of our board was YSG. John Sargent of Elsevier. John Sargent of Macmillan was the chairman of the search. Marcus Dola of Penguin Random House was the incoming chairman. And they not only hired me, but they've been very supportive every single step of the way during my tenure. One of the things I would give Marcus a shout out for is that Penguin Random House, he's the head of Global Penguin Random House based in New York. His management team globally, meaning his principal reports globally around the world, are predominantly women. And so I think it's an important point that the questioner asked by including men in that question, because we need men and women both to be committed. And it takes time. It takes time for women to move up, to be in positions to be then promoted to the top jobs. And so, I see that as a commitment to training people to become the CEO level leaders. In the US, we have something like 75% women in the workforce, but it's not reflected in the very top jobs, right? So, you need to have a commitment, and the commitment has to include the people already in those top jobs. Since I've been at AAP, I've been working with my board members to get more women on our board, nonetheless. And some women that I would point to for the questioner are Christy Henry at Princeton University Press. She was only at Princeton, I think, for a year or two, and I approached her and sort of said, I need you on the board. Would you consider putting your hat in the ring? I think you'll be elected. And she was. And I really, credit her for taking on even more. Terrell Mahoney at Chronicle Books is based out in San Francisco. Similar thing, was fairly new to her CEO position and stepped onto our board. She's been part of our dinners, Boudour, in London and Frankfurt. And Julia Reedhead, who's at Norton in New York, which is our oldest and only independent house continuously from the beginning of its origin. So there's some names from my world in the US, that people that I look up to.
That's wonderful. And I love what you shared, Maria, about sometimes, we just need a little bit of encouragement, and that's something that I've faced personally as well when I've had women sort of like open the door for me or say, you can do it, just go for it, and I think that encouragement really goes a long way. And that's something that maybe I would recommend everybody who's watching today to really reach out to a fellow publisher who's, growing in their career. I could say that, and then maybe give them a little bit of a positive boost to take that next step. So I want to move on to Karini now for another question here. Karini, as a business leader, have you done anything in your workplace for diversity and inclusion? Have you proactively sought to level the playing field for women? And if so, could you give us some examples of what you've done?
I've been trying to do this work like every day. As you said, we have to encourage other women and try to bring them to work with you and try to encourage them to do.
You're on mute, Karini. Could you just go back on again? Yeah, thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I have been trying to do this on a day-by-day business or day-by-day usual, right? And what I think is that it's important that you create like premises that can be really supported as long-term, not only while you were doing, but as you have suggested in one of your last speeches that you gave us, like doing written statements where you can understand really that this is important. And I think that gender is not the only one thing that you have to consider. You have to consider other types of diversity as well, not only men or women or capable or incapable, but we have to consider other types of responsibilities as well.
Yes, that's definitely true. And in IPA, we're quite lucky to have Michiel Coleman as the presidential envoy of diversity and inclusion. And he's been really pushing forward on that agenda. We're so grateful to have him. He's done a lot of amazing work there. We're getting some great questions here. So I'm going to ask a few from the audience, some questions that we've got here. So have any of you experienced such negative mansplaining encounters with male authors, or is it just colleagues and bosses? This is from Amira Abul Majd from Cairo. Hi, Amira. Thank you for your question. Does anyone want to answer that? Have any authors given you any hard time, or is it just been from colleagues or bosses? Go ahead, Tamiso.
So I try work with less men than I do women, which isn't very easy because the ratio of submissions from men is higher than that of women. And I put that down to the male arrogance, having been fed for so long and just kind of believing that they can do things, and women just kind of like, oh my gosh, my child is sick. Can I write this book? It's all of those things. But I find that the minute you sign, I actually had to turn down a man that I'd signed whose book was fantastic. But I wrote to him and said, hi, I am very interested. I would love to take this on. And his response back to me was, oh, I'm so excited. So this is how this is going to work. And I thought, in whose business, sweetie? No. So I just let it go. And then after 2 weeks or so, I just wrote back to him and I said, we're having some financial problems, so I'm not going to be able to take this on as I wanted. But you don't, and I find that's what men do. Like a lot of male authors want to come into your business and tell you how to run your business. They move very quickly from being, oh, here's my manuscript, see how wonderful I am, to, okay, so you know nothing, I know everything, I'm going to tell you how this works. And I've had that a lot with a lot of my male authors. And so I want to try and balance it out. So last year I put out a tweet and where I said, I'm really concerned by the number of submissions I'm seeing from women. And from that, I had a response from a lady called Natalia Flores, who is from Mexico, and she's living in South Africa with her husband, who's works for the embassy here. And another woman who, Bianca Marias, who's a South African author but lives in Canada. And they both reached out to me and they said, if you want to do something about this, we want to. So Natalia offered her house, Bianca offered money, and we had a residency. So we had a Blackbird, residency just for women. And one of them is being published later this year. And so those are the kind of things that I hope, it's just because there's very little funding to go into these things. And, books aren't the sexiest of things to people sometimes, especially people with money. But those are the kind of initiatives that I think we could do even if it's all over the world. A lot of studies and opinion pieces came out during this COVID time to say that less women were publishing, even with journals and academically in this time, because the women's work in the house is a lot more than what men have to do. We have to take care of children and we worry about this and that. And so that work has dwindled, and we have to actively, even from that level, in terms of what output is going out there, we have to sift through it. We have to find the women, and you almost have to love them out of like their self-doubt and everything else that bogs down on their mind, but you have to do it. It's the work that we have to do.
That's really inspirational, Thabiso. I think, you've really hit the nail on the head. We really have a responsibility, I think, to change the situation. And, the fact that, we are women making decisions in the publishing industry, we're going to see the results of that in the next decade, because I think that's where we'll see the diversity in the type of books we publish. Having diverse teams reflects the kind of books that come out of publishing houses, and it's important to have people of different backgrounds making those decisions. Thabiso, you've got quite a fan club here. People are loving your comments. Tricky question. Publishing for women is a special place and the ratio is very high. How can we reflect that in the rest of society? Does anybody want to jump in and answer that question? And I also have another question here is there a book? I saw that a little bit earlier. Is there a book that any of you recommend that reflects the advancement of women in society? If so, have you published it? So I leave these questions to you, my lovely guests. Does anyone want to answer any of these questions? Go ahead, Maria.
I don't think this is entirely on point, but on the first question, I think it might be helpful for me to describe what's happening politically and legally in the US right now. So politically, you may have read that there's been quite a lot of unrest in the midst of the pandemic and the different lockdowns of businesses and people being shut in, but particularly because of racial abuse, triggered simmering for quite some time, but triggered by one particular abusive situation in which a Black man was killed by a police officer on video, inhumanely. And it has set off in the last month just a series of protests in every major city. I mean, it's really been something to live through and to witness. And I think there's been a reckoning. And I think, the question when stuff like this happens is always, is something going to change, right? Is the dynamic going to change for people of color, for women of color who either are themselves victims of that kind of intolerance and inequality, or are mourning the loss of the Black men in their lives. And so we're doing a lot of different things as a publishing industry. Everybody is reading. The good thing is people turn to books. We want them to read. There's a lot to choose from. There are movies, of course, too. At AAP, for my own staff, everybody is reading 2 books this summer, and we'll talk about them as a staff. Many publishing houses are doing collective reading from a list of educational books, fiction and nonfiction. It's really important to do that. And then, you know, there's the workforce issue for people of color, and how are they reflected, whether they're male or female in the work. And there's the titles that get published. Who decides what effort goes into diversifying them? What's the balance between markets that are viable and responsibility? Freedom of expression just means the government can't censor you. It doesn't tell you what you should do as a good citizen, right? And so starting from the premise that all publishers want to publish vast and wide list of books, how do they make those decisions? How do they balance those factors? And so a couple of weeks ago, the young staffs predominantly of many of our major publishing houses, I want to say they walked out, but they're all teleworking, right, because of the pandemic. But they called in sick, and they dedicated their day to donating their efforts to worthy causes or their parts of their salaries to make a statement that they're not happy as young employees not having enough of a voice, and they don't feel that their CEOs have been accountable on these issues. They've stated good objectives, but they haven't really reported out how they're going to get them. And the CEOs all responded publicly, mostly saying you're right. And now we're seeing management changes, leadership tables being put together that reflect, you know, young people, old people, people of color. And to your point, Bodour, it takes time, but you have to put the building blocks in place. And so we're seeing a lot of that. And then on LGBTQT, 4 years ago, the US Supreme Court legalized gay marriage. I did not think that would happen in my lifetime. And then it accelerated, and then it happened really rapidly. And it was astonishing, really. And last week, the Supreme Court handed down a decision. It's called Bostock versus Clayton County, Georgia, which says you cannot fire someone if for a reason related to their LGBTQT status. Again, I mean, we have a fairly conservative Supreme Court. So these are big decisions that reflect where the populace is, I think. So I just wanted to mention that. It's exciting. It's a lot of it is tragic and born of stress and, you know, inequality and abuse, but it's inspiring at the same time, and we're living through it.
Thank you for sharing that, Maria, because I think it's very timely with what's happening right now. And I think the lockdown, COVID-19, all of that has really forced us to look inwards and really see what's not working in our societies, and then speak up and really demand change. And I'm on the other side of the ocean, looking and seeing what's happening in the United States, and in awe of all of these people standing up for their rights. It's really commendable, and I hope that we see positive change come out of it. There was one question on COVID-19 as well, so I just quickly want to pass that on to Karini. I know she has a comment as well, but Karini and Anne, I'd like to ask you as well about COVID-19, the situation. Has anything changed in terms of your sales or in any support from your governments? I know Anne and I had a little discussion about this offline, but maybe we'll start with Karini first. And then you had a comment as well that you wanted to make. Go ahead, Karini.
I just wanted to make a comment on Maria's speech, because we see lots of differences between countries, so we can feel how developed and how important it is, these opportunities for each country. So I can see here many differences, and it's very, very good for us to understand that and try to support where it's more difficult or not. Now, going to Bodour's question on COVID-19. Yes, we had stopped our work from workplace on beginning of March, I think, at the same time as Europe, or maybe a couple of days after. and it has really stopped all of our business here with books, related to books, because all the bookshops and shopping malls and street stores, they were all closed. And it's been very, very difficult times. Since 10 days now, we are on a reopening stage, but we didn't have actually a lockdown all over Brazil. So we have very high numbers at the moment. They are still growing up, and we are very, very worried about what's going up next, because we don't see many governmental structure that goes all over Brazil. So we see governors on each state doing its job by itself. So it's really, really difficult for us at the moment.
I see. Thank you for sharing, Karini. Anne, I know we spoke a little bit about government support during COVID-19. Do you have any views you want to share today?
Yeah, if I may first to comment on what Maria was saying earlier, I think Europe has been extremely shocked by what happened in the United States, and it has forced us to open up chapter of our own history, our colonial history, that we had handily closed because it was far, it was long time ago. And now all over Europe, we are having conversation, and I don't know where they will go, but I think that they are important, and important about the representation of minorities within society. To answer, but that's on COVID. Well, COVID has been a catastrophe for European publishing. Basically, all over Europe, bookshop closed. I think the only country where they didn't close were the Netherlands and Sweden, and it really showed the importance of bookshops to the book economy. We believe that we lost, and it's difficult. We'll know at the end of the year and maybe later, but publishers in Europe think they may have lost about 30% of their turnover, their annual turnover. Online sales went up, but it wasn't enough to back the lost physical sales. And booksellers were fantastic. We saw booksellers in Germany delivering on bicycle or on skateboards, and people. I read that in France, people could buy vouchers from different numbers of retail, and it was with bookshop that they bought most to buy in the future, because they considered they needed to support bookseller more than maybe flower shops or other. And in terms of government support, that's very different. I mean, you have well, in most countries, they receive some support for temporary unemployment of their staff, or for the rental of their offices, etc. You have some countries who really put forward strong help. I just heard yesterday that Austria has decided to decrease by 2% VAT for 6 months, and doesn't expect the publishers to lower the price by 2%, but just they believe that this is 2% that goes into the for publishers, for booksellers, for authors, because authors are going to benefit from it. So you have things like that. You have a number of countries who are massively buying for libraries. So that's a benefit to all. They're buying via bookshop to libraries, and so citizens will have better collection. But they could do better. And definitely, unfortunately, the European Union has done very little. They have very little means. They've given a lot of money to the member states of the European Union, but there's a lot of resentment within the artistic and the cultural community that the EU should do more to help its cultural sector, who has been very present during the COVID crisis. I mean, there was books, music, a lot of culture on the internet, which was the only way we could communicate the one with each other.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to find some positive examples of countries that have supported the publishing industry, and we're compiling all of that on the IPA website. So anybody who's interested in seeing what countries and governments have done, please have a look at the IPA website, and you'll be able to see that. Thank you for sharing that. And I just want to answer the question on the book that has any advice for women who are going through difficult situations in their workplace. There's one book I read called Invisible Women by Caroline Perez, and it's not on the publishing industry, but it's a great book that shows how women were underrepresented really in different sectors, and how they did a lot of the groundwork to get where they are today. So I just quickly have two questions. We're almost out of time. So my question is that actually it's more of a comment and a suggestion. Publish Her is putting together a mentorship scheme for women. We've received a lot of feedback from our members saying they want to have a mentorship scheme where we're going to bring some experienced women in the book industry to give 1 hour of their time for other women who are looking for guidance and inspiration. Have you ever been involved in such a mentorship scheme? Would you be willing to take part in this? This is an open invitation to all of you. What do you think of the idea? I'd love to hear your feedback. Anybody would like to take that question?
Well, I've had a lot of requests for people to be mentored by me, but it makes me a little scared, because what do I have to do when I mentor you? You know, do I have to say good morning every morning? Because that's what some of my authors expect, and I'm just so worried about it.
That's what we're saying. 1 hour of your time. That's all we're asking.
Absolutely. If someone really just wants to hear me talk and listen to me babble for an hour, I'd be happy to do that. But I also think that I'm interested in two tiers, that I would love to help the people that could benefit from listening from me. But I also think that I could benefit from listening to other women as well. You know, I mean, before, you know, publishing as a Black woman in South Africa is very lonely, and it feels like one is on a desert. And I think until I met you, Bodour, and I'd come to the IPA seminar in Nairobi, I really didn't know that there was a community that I could tap into, and that has enabled me and emboldened me a lot in what I do and the choices I make and the decisions I make. And if I can help be that for someone else anywhere in the world, I will happily do it.
Thank you, Tabiso. I'm going to call you up and take you up on that offer. Anybody else wants to jump in? Go ahead, Maria. Oh, sorry.
I think it's a great idea. I think we have a responsibility, right, to do that. And you're making it kind of fun, right? Because now we can do it globally. And I would echo the thought that let's not do it just for, we should mentor young women, but a lot of times women get stuck a little later in life. They get a little stuck trying to figure out what direction to go to in mid-management, or, you know, whether to make a left turn during their career. So I would say let's keep it flexible, but I would be delighted to help organize it, to participate, to mentor, to be mentored.
Reverse mentorship, yeah.
And, I'll throw out one book because it's a new book, but Ruth Bader Ginsburg, On Life, Love, Liberty, and Law by Jeffrey Rosen. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg is on our U.S. Supreme Court. She's also terrific on things like free expression and copyright law in support of the publishing industry. But, you know, she's a fascinating character who came up, you know, with the support of her husband, really. But she talks about personal support. She talks about what she's done for women. I'm reading it.
Thank you, Maria. We all love RBG. She's She's quite a character. Go ahead, Karini. Maria just dropped off. We have some issues with the connection, but she'll join again.
I think that again, we see all women thinking they're not capable of doing something. We have to start believing in our inner voice, believing in ourselves, and do that to help other women. It would be lovely too.
Brilliant. Thank you, Karini. I'm going to take you all on that offer. So our last discussion point before we have a look at questions from the audience is that I want to shed some light on some guidelines that we're putting together on Publish Her's website. If you have a look, I'm sure Ben will put the link in down for you. We're working on a toolkit for women, or actually to create gender-friendly company practices and a fair working culture. And this is going to be freely downloaded from the Publish Her website. And I wanted to make this announcement today for anybody here watching, listening. You can go to the Publish Her website and download this. It's sort of like a toolkit. It's the beginning of a toolkit. We're calling it Publish Her Diversity and Inclusion Guidelines that we put together. And this is really just the beginning, you know. Would love to have more input from anybody who's reading this, anybody who wants to contribute. But I'm not going to go through the guidelines entirely today, but I want you all, an invitation for everybody to have a look at them, to see how we can ensure equality in the workplace, how we can have gender equality, and it's often regarded as a journey, so it's really a long process that we all have to take together. How we can emphasize D&I in recruitment as well, and how we can have a positive workplace culture that is inclusive. And these are some of the basic guidelines that we put forth for people to have a look at, be inspired by. If you want to reach out to us and add some more items onto this document, we'd be more than happy to do that. And I also want to comment and say that Publish Her conducted a survey as well, and we really want to understand what are the challenges for women in publishing, and I want to encourage as many people as possible to answer the survey, which we will also put in the link below. And this is really going to help us put together a toolkit that we want to make freely available for anybody to really access and have data on global statistics of women in publishing, how they can use these guidelines and toolkits to improve their working cultures as well. So this is something we're working together on, and I'd love to hear your feedback. Have you experienced anything? Are you working on something similar? Please jump in with an answer if you have. Anne, I'm going to look at you. You've been very quiet, so if you can unmute.
I'm as I said, I think that in Europe, what would be really useful is to mentor women to want to be in boards of their respective trade organization, and then to volunteer to go to the European level and come and join us in the board of FEP. As I say, we've had one woman in the 30 years I've been there, so that's not that many. And there's that, but I don't know. I suppose you need to give sufficient confidence to women so that they feel that they can properly represent their peers, including men, within their national organization and then international organization. I'm not sure I have the answer, but I think it's an interesting topic to dig in, and maybe something we should speak within our membership to wonder why there are so few women around the table, and when most of the women around the table, then they would be director of organization, but not publishers representative. So I'm going to read your guidelines, and I'm going to see whether we can use them within our own organization.
Please do. And the survey as well. I encourage everybody to answer the survey if you haven't. It's just going to take a maximum of 10 minutes of your time and would really be very valuable for the work we're doing. Go ahead, Maria, you had a comment.
I was just agreeing with Anne. I think I quite agree that the need is dire at the executive level. So again, although I think all of us have probably helped a lot of young women, and I will certainly continue to do that. I really enjoy it. More recently, in the last 5 years in the leadership positions that I've had, I've really tried to promote women. And when I'm able to do that and have control of it. But beyond that, in our industries, to make a bigger statement, I think we should think about that, because it's really getting women into the executive positions. And we've covered all the reasons, right? They may not have the confidence, they may not have the support, somebody may not tell them, hey, you're talented. And then there are just the day-to-day issues. I have kids, I've got a working spouse, or I've got other commitments. And that's more about women trying to fit into a world that doesn't support women. And that's more about policies changing so that women can take care of their children and also have the career choice that they're talented and qualified for. So I would love to see us begin to talk about that, Bodour. Let's do that.
Wonderful. I look forward to that. Thank you all so much. I'm getting a message from Prashant that we need to wrap up. It's been a wonderful 58 minutes with all of you. I could go on and keep talking, but it's been so interesting, and I'm sure we're going to carry this conversation offline. Thank you to all of my guests, my lovely guests today, Tabiso, Karini, Anne, Maria, and Mitya, of course. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us here today. And thank you to all the people behind the scenes who've also made this possible. A shout out to Prashant and to Ben. Thank you guys for being around, but behind the scenes and helping us prepare for today. And I just want to leave everybody with a last message to say that diversity and inclusion are very important and make us really resilient, especially at these challenging times. So everybody needs to think about that, be aware of it, and try their best to make sure that we have diverse teams where we're working. Thank you again, ladies, and thank you everybody for watching. All the best. Bye.
Thank you too.